I hope that you have already voted. If you have not, I'm going to share some information with you about voting and then also share some information about the upcoming ballot and some resources for you. So, a really good source that you should know, and this is a national site, it is vote411.org. Vote411.org is a resource by the National League of Women Voters, and it provides nonpartisan, unbiased information about where you can register to vote, where you can check the status of an absentee ballot application, and also where you can find out who's on the election ballot for your particular state. And this is information for all 50 states nationwide. It also has information about the state election commissions as well. Here in South Carolina, we are very closely nearing the end of absentee voting. If you have not voted absentee, it is not too late. You still can do so. You can request an absentee ballot application. Although at this point, I would recommend that you go in person to vote if at all possible, but it is still possible to request an absentee ballot application. And when you do that, mail it back to the Election Commission, or you can email it in, or you can actually drop it by your county voter registration office. And then you'll need to request a general election ballot. And then you'll need to make sure that it is either mailed in or brought back in person by Tuesday, November 6th on election day by 7 p.m. So make sure that you do that. There are a number of ways that you can vote absentee. So in South Carolina, our state election commission site is scvotes.org, and that is the state election commission website. And you can find out information about a sample ballot. You can find out the referendum that are on there. Where I live, there are two referendum for Richland County. So make sure you check that. And it's free information, and the people will be very happy at the Election Commission to give you information, answer any questions about sample ballots as well. So make sure you check out scvotes.org if you have questions about that. Wanted to kind of touch on some of the reasons that you could vote absentee. So there are about 17 reasons in South Carolina why you can vote absentee. Unlike most states, South Carolina doesn't have early voting, but we have absentee voting. And so of the 17 reasons, and I won't enumerate them all, they are listed at scvotes.org. But one of the reasons is perhaps you may have to work on election day. So for me, for example, I will be out of town actually in the greater Charleston area with clients um, looking at their elections. And so I will actually vote on Monday as well to make sure that my voice is counted and my vote is counted. But actually, if you have to work on election day, that is one of the reasons that you can vote absentee. Also, if you have to be out of town, perhaps for a family vacation, or if you are caring for an elderly person that is disabled, you can vote absentee. Or if you've had a death in the family within a couple of days before the election, you also can vote absentee. Again, for the full list in South Carolina, go to scvotes.org. These requirements vary by state, so the vote411.org will help you identify in your state whether you can vote absentee, and if so, what the requirements are, what types of identification you need, what types of application ballot processes that you need as well. So that is a really good source to get nonpartisan information as well. And so what I wanted to do during the final couple of days of the election for the candidates, I wanted to share some strategies that you could do if, for the last couple of days of your campaign. Hopefully by now you understand your target voter, you understand who you need to be speaking with, and you've put together a plan in place. So the word for the day is GOTV for candidates, and that stands for get out the vote. And very simply, get out the vote process is a process by which candidates actually, it's the culminating effort of all of the work up until this point, and they are actually seeking to turn out their vote. So it's very straightforward as to what it means. So if you're a candidate, I recommend that you do these three things to help maximize your get out the vote efforts. So the first thing is have messaging down to a science. So hopefully by this point you've identified who your target voter is and you've developed unique messages to help get your target audience out to vote. One thing that you could do, you could offer robocalls. And so the robocalls are really good if you are seeking to reach a large number of people, but don't have the time or the resources to do it. you can actually pre-record a message on your behalf and send it out to your targeted list of voters. So this is where messaging is really important. So with the Get Out the Vote efforts, you actually could use a robocall where it's called IVR, interactive voice recording. And through that process, it's a pre-recorded message from you. But then at any point during the call, a client could, or voter could actually push number one or any number that you indicate to be transferred to a live person. And that's helpful for identifying people that need rides to the polls. So you could use that as a tool to get people to the polls. Also, by now, as part of messaging, you should have a list of all of your precinct polling locations. And so outreach is the second thing that you can be doing. So once you know who your target voter is, and once you've developed a strategy to reach them, this now is a very important part of outreach. So you can have all the data, you can know who you should be targeting, but if you can't get your people to the polls, then all of those efforts are for naught. So as part of your outreach strategy, you should identify all the precinct polling locations, and you should ensure, to the extent that you have resources, that you have people staffing those precinct polling locations and actually on election day checking on your behalf the voter roster list. So for example, if you knew you had, let's say, 30% expected turnout in one of your precincts, then if you knew you already have your core list of voters, you can actually compare that to the voter list and actually make sure that the people that said they were going to vote for you have voted. And this is where strategy comes in. So what you could do as part of that outreach, we do it in shifts from 7 a.m., 9 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and again at 6:30 p.m. So as I mentioned, you can go around to the polls and you can get the voter roster list. And during these increments, we compare that list against the people that we knew were going to vote. And if we don't see people that have voted at these increments, we then have a team that will call in and seek to mobilize people. So it's really important that you not only identify your voter, but that you have a strategy to communicate with them through outreach, and that you also have a strategy to get them to the polls. So when you're going and you're checking the precinct polling locations at these different time frames, if your target voters haven't already voted, then you want to make sure that you're getting people to the polls as quickly as possible as well. And then the last tip that I'll share with you today that you also should consider, GOTV is all about having a good infrastructure. So what you can do is prepare an organizational chart, identify all the precinct polling locations, identify all of your volunteers, and assign roles to your campaign and your volunteer staff. These can be volunteer roles, but you want to make sure on election day, I liken it to a conductor at an orchestra. So in my opinion, GOTV should not be stressful, because if you have the appropriate infrastructure and if you have the appropriate staff and resources, then really it is the culminating effort of everything you've done prior to. And having that organizational structure will clearly define who does what are the roles, and then what are the areas of responsibility. Your primary role as the candidate is going around to each of the precinct polling locations to the extent possible and greeting voters. You want to spend some time of your day doing that to make sure people can recognize name, face recognition. But then also you want to make sure that you have at least these following roles assigned. So you want to have a field team. Your field team will be responsible for making sure that you're able to get your people out to vote. So through your organizational structure, you should have people taking people to the rides to the polls. Also, Lyft is a resource that you can leverage. So if you don't have the volunteers on hand that can take people to the polls, you can partner with Lyft and they'll take people to the polls. So perhaps getting a database of people that need to go to the polls and then connecting them with Lyft to do so is a good resource. It's a free resource, and they've offered their services there as well. You also should have what I call runners. These are the people that are going to go around to the precinct polling locations at each of these identified times, and they're going to make sure that there aren't any voter impropriety going on or any violations going on as well. The Vote 411 website has a national phone number that if you detect any voting irregularities, you can report it there. Certainly, at a minimum, report it to the campaign, the poll manager, and make sure that any voting irregularities are observed and reported so that they can be addressed swiftly. But in addition to that, your runner should be making sure that, again, the people that you've identified, they're voting, and if not, they need to communicate back into your headquarters on election day and make sure that you have a way to either identify people who haven't voted or to further mobilize more people if you need to do so as well. And then you should also have what I call a crisis communications room, and really that really is your headquarters. This can be out of an office, they can be out of a shared office with another candidate, but this is where all of your coordinating activities are going to occur. And you need to have a centralized command center where you can send out your runners, where you can send out your field team, where you can send out people who are making phone calls. You need to have a centralized location. And then also another role that I would have is a volunteer phone bank effort. So the political parties, they have their own resources and they're actually calling on behalf of their candidates. But to the extent that you have resources, you should be calling your voters as well, specifically encouraging them to get out the vote. And I can't say get out the vote enough because it's not just about knowing who you should target. It is really the execution of that strategy on election day. So if you do those recommended tips, hopefully your election day will go smoothly. There won't be any challenges, but if there are challenges, you'll have the appropriate infrastructure in place. So with that, I just want to conclude by saying I hope that you go vote. I hope that you are informed on who's in the ballot. I hope that you make an informed decision about who you vote for because we have a lot at stake at this election and every vote truly does matter. And it would be a shame not to vote on election day. Again, in closing, you can go to vote411.org for resources. Please do also partner with Lyft if either you're a campaign or a candidate or you're an individual that personally needs a ride. Partner with Lyft to use that resource. And then here in South Carolina, please do check the scvotes.org website for election commission information. And if you're outside of South Carolina, go to vote411.org for information about various election commissions and the rules that apply. So, of course, if you have questions, you can send me a direct message through my company's page at Where's Your Strategy, or you can send us an email at info@mycapitalconsulting.com, and we would be just delighted to answer any questions that you have about voting or strategy or how you can maximize your efforts in getting out the vote on election day. With that, hope that you have a good weekend, and again, do go vote.